This is the DRF Sports Form podcast. Here's your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Sports Form podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker for show number 6, the Wednesday, November 7th edition of the podcast. Back from Louisville, back ready to talk about some sports, and happy to do so with the usual crew, starting off with the managing editor from DRF Sports Form. He has been traveling around to various NFL cities. Curious to hear about his travels. He is Scott Gramling of the Sports Form. How are you, my friend?
Pete, I'm doing great. Good to be back. Good to be grounded a bit, and I'm glad that I'm alive to tell about my journeys to both Buffalo and New England recently.
Someone who's never grounded, it seems, always up in the air somewhere, so much so that he was actually flying when we recorded this show last week during the chaos of Breeders' Cup. But we've got him back. He's from the planet Texas. He is, on the other show, we call him the People's Champion. Here he's Mr. Friday Night Lights. He's Jonathon Kinchen. JK, what's up?
Funny enough, last week, I filmed my JK's play of the day for the DRF for Out of the Gate, and I filmed it on the airplane. Literally filmed it sitting in the plane. Luckily, I had the seat next to me open, so no one looked at me crazy. Producer Craig actually hit the bet that I gave, so he wants me to do it from the plane every week now.
Fantastic. I hope the plane wasn't in the process of taking off. We didn't have an Alec Baldwin Words with Friends situation here, did we?
No, not at all. I recorded it when I landed. I shot it over to him to save some time, but nonetheless, wherever we can get it done, we'll get it done.
All about the efficiency, JK. We had an opportunity last week to yap a bit about the trip that you and I made to Cincinnati, courtesy of our friends at WinStar, to watch that crazy Bengals-Buccaneers game. Was just curious if you had any memories from that day you wanted to share before we start diving into this week's games.
Well, it was funny. I don't know if other people are like me, but there's some serious sports wagers that can be made. And then there's the, oh, darn, I'm going to this game, I have to bet it now, sports wagers that are made. So on the ride up, trying to decide which side we were going to hop on, Pete, I told you I liked the over. You giggled at me a little bit, and they blew past the over. But we took
wasn't it like 65 points or something? I mean, it was just, I giggled, not that it was a bad bet, but just that I hadn't seen an over like that in an NFL game too often. Let's be clear. It's not like I thought they were going under.
Absolutely, but we jumped on the side of the Bengals who almost lost it. But no, it's always a lot of fun to get to sporting events. I think all of us as kids kind of fell in love with sports by going with someone to a game when we were younger and having those fond and memories of it. So that's it's always fun to get back out there. Sometimes we're used to watching on the TV, but fun to get back and watch them live and in color.
Let me ask you, Scott. JK brings up an interesting point about there are bets that are sort of your prime plays, the ones as a bettor that you want your week to come down to. But then there's also the concept of the action bet. And serious players are often divided. Some will say, don't make any action bets. There's so much going on in the NFL. So many of the games are at the same time. Just put more on the game you really believe in. Others believe, like we do, that there's nothing wrong with having a smaller type play to make yourself pay attention and give yourself a little bit of fun. Where do you stay on that? Where do you stand on that whole debate between action bets and prime plays when it comes to football?
Oh, yeah, I stand in that exact spot. And I think that it's all a matter of degree, right? I think that when you're guys like us, and I think you're guys like most people listening to this pod, you're in a situation where it's, even just a little bit of action goes a long way for the rooting interest. Are you guys hearing those sirens? Sorry.
I'm not actually. I think we're okay, but everything going okay? They're not coming for you, are they?
I sure hope not. Some of the things I did last week, I don't really recall, so perhaps they are. But sorry, just kind of getting back to it. I think any bit of action is enough to give rooting interest. So I'm kind of on the side of I'll put action bets at very small levels and really keep more discipline in, making bigger wagers on the things I really truly believe in. Because again, let's face it, even making a $10 bet with a buddy, it's not like you have any less rooting interest than you do if you're posting a hefty wager on.
There's definitely something to be said about being right, especially when you can point to your friend being wrong. And speaking of that, JK, I think you got one over on me in the NFL when we were talking about the Super Bowl and who ought to be the favorite for the Super Bowl in that car ride back from Cincinnati to Louisville. You made a pretty strong prediction. I'll let you, rather than eat the humble pie over here, I'll let you crow about it.
Well, we had to do something. We were stuck in an Uber back from Cincinnati. We got the free ride up to Cincinnati. We got the suite, we got the hot dogs, the wings, the nachos, the adult beverages, but we had to find our own way home. So we had to talk about something in the car ride home. Look, I was just saying, simply from a value standpoint, this was prior to the Saints beating Minnesota, prior to the Saints beating the Rams. If they were to win those two games, I thought they would be the favorites in the Super Bowl. And if you thought that they were going to win those two games, it was probably a great job, great opportunity to jump on them to win the Super Bowl. It was, I think, maybe 8 or 9 to 1 at that point. So they won those two. I haven't looked yet, but I would predict that they're probably 3 or 4 to 1 at this point.
I can probably find that information somewhere, but certainly the price will have shortened significantly. And we talked about that a little bit when we did buy, sell, hold.
They are 7-2.
7-2 favorites. So the price has halved. What have the Rams eased out to from what you're seeing, Scott?
Let's see. The Rams are now at 5-2. So the Rams haven't remained the favorite, which, Pete, you and I talked about this last week, and I was on the side of JK. I felt like if the Saints end up winning the game, which they did, they now have the tiebreaker for home field over the Rams, and that's what I thought was most significant here. If you really want to start digging into the weeds a little bit, consider also the Rams still need to play the Chiefs, whereas the Saints just don't have that hard a game on the schedule. Now, the Chiefs game is going to be neutral site, and it's going to be in Mexico City, Week 11. So I think the combination of the fact that the Rams would have to go to New Orleans if the two teams end up with the same record. And again, we're getting a bit ahead of it, but at the same token, we're in the second half of the season now. So I think those are the kind of things that are worth looking at this point. And that's why I felt like if the Saints won that game, and they did, I felt like they would be at least the same as the Rams, if not a slight bit more favored, because they do have the tiebreaker for home field come playoff time.
It's a good point. And looking at it, I mean, my interest in those two numbers right now isn't so much wanting to lump on the Saints so much as wishing you could just fade the Rams at that price. That just seems too short given what we've seen. I feel like in the last couple of weeks, it was a short number before when we did the initial buy, sell, hold about the Super Bowl. And I feel like there definitely should be some more ease in that number, but we'll see. And that's a game we'll play again as the season goes on. JK, we'll start with you looking over this slate of games at the weekend. I know you're always thinking in terms of teasers and always have a variety of games you want to talk about. Is there a particular matchup, not necessarily your best bet here, but just a particular matchup you feel like is worthy of discussion from the Sunday slate?
Yeah, the tease games that kind of grabbed my attention early this week, there's 3 of them. The Packers, who you could, depending on what line you see, you could try to get them under a field goal at home against the Dolphins. The inconsistency of the Packers makes me a little bit nervous. The home field advantage could push me over the top when it comes to those guys. You could also get the Chiefs under 10. Not crazy about that, but with that huge line at 17, you got to think that the Chiefs are going to always be in a position at least to extend that game to 2 scores. You feel like it would always be in reach, as well as they're playing and as poorly as the Cardinals are playing. And then the other one was the Rams getting back home, getting them to -3. My favorite types of games are the ones where you can tease them down to just kind of just having to win, essentially -2.5. is just winning, but there's still those weird games where that might not get the job done. And then the other one I thought was attractive was the Eagles. I know they haven't been world beaters this year, but the Cowboys are really, really bad. And having a team at home to just win is something that I like to always be alive to.
Scott, when you look over this slate of games from the point of view as the managing editor of DRF Sports Form, is there a particular game, maybe on the Sunday slate especially, that leaps out to you as one that features what the Sports Form does well?
Yeah, I think above all others, I'll give you two games. One is Jacksonville, Indianapolis. The other one is Detroit, Chicago. And it's been a bit of a theme in recent weeks. There's certainly been a theme in the Sports Forum, but we've talked about a couple times on this podcast that teams that have been dominant have tended to be overvalued. Now, one of the teams, and the team on a bye this week, is the Ravens. And we've spoken repeatedly about the Ravens, and we've been fading the Ravens, and we've been making money fading the Ravens because of those big wins they had early in the season, especially in the season opener against the Bills. Well, here we are now, and the Ravens are going into the bye sitting at 4-5. And this was a team, as hard as it is to believe right now, they were favored in Carolina, a 6-2 Carolina team. And Carolina won that game handily. That was one of the picks we gave out here on this podcast. Chicago is in a similar situation where the betting system is teams that are outscoring opponents by an average of double digits when they're coming off back-to-back games of allowing 14 points or fewer. Those teams are just 3-15 against the spread. And we had the Bears as one of those systems earlier in the year. They were coming off that huge win against the Buccaneers, 48-10, and they were going down to Miami. And that was the game that Brock Osweiler started for the first time.
Yes.
And the Bears lost that game outright. For the Bears to be a 6.5-point favorite over what's really been a solid Detroit team for most of the season after that embarrassing loss to the Jets in the Monday night opener, to me, that's exceptional value on the Lions here. I really feel like that should be a 3-point line. I think it should be Bears by 3, maybe 3.5, certainly not 6.5. So I think there's an awful lot of value there.
I like it. I want to talk about, you mentioned another game too, but let's pause here for a second. I wonder if that line isn't happening to that degree, in part because of the perception of each team's personality at home and away. JK, I know you keep a lot of your own numbers. How much do you pay attention to short-term home road split stuff in the NFL? For example, the Lions being 1-3 away, the Bears being 3-1 at home. Is that going to factor how you look at a game like this?
I don't believe in teams are good road teams. I just that's way too broad of a stroke for me. I think that teams that play good on the road are good football teams. I don't think that I don't narrow it to, they're on the road, they play well on the road. No, they're good or they're not, or they were lucky enough to play well on the road a few times. I like the Bears. I think they're really good on defense. I think they do some good things on offense. Trubisky makes me a little uncomfortable at times. The times I've watched him play, he's really good at times, inconsistent at times. In this situation, the Lions have just been kind of inconsistent the entire year. If I was on a side here, it would have to be the Bears at home. The way they played last week. But I don't really try to narrow teams to being good road teams or good home teams. I think that those things are assumed. You're going to play a little bit down on the road. You're going to play a little bit up at home. Good football teams play well on the road.
Your difference in perspective there, the two different opinions about the game might come down to betting personality and wagering pool choice. JK being the king of the teasers and Scott just focusing on the potential line value there. I want to get back to this Jaguar Colt game you mentioned, Scott. Right now, the line Indy -3 at home, over under a 46.5. You have an angle into this one?
Yeah, this is a situation here where a team like the Jaguars being undervalued, and understandably so. I mean, this is a team that has been awful in recent weeks, but I feel like they're being too severely undervalued in this one. And I think it's a good spot for them coming off a bye and going up against a Colts team that, to me, still has a lot to prove when going against better opponents. Yes, they looked good against the Bills and Raiders. A case could be made that the Bills and Raiders are the two worst teams in the league right now. I'm not sure that there's another team, maybe the Cardinals, but I don't even think so, that has a lower power rating across the board than what the Bills and the Raiders do. So I think what the Colts have done in recent weeks, you kind of have to look at it in a bit more context. There are betting systems here that the teams that have been beaten by the spread by 41 points or more over the previous 5 games, and this is the Jaguars in this case, those teams are 28-5 against the spread since the start of 2009 when facing an opponent that's gone over the total by more than 34 points over its last 3 games. Now, again, sounds like a lot of jumbled numbers, but really what that's saying is, teams that have been overvalued and pummeled by the spread in recent weeks, and again, that has been the Jaguars. They were 0-4 straight up and against the spread during the month of October. They scored only 46 points in October. That's only 6 more points than they gave up to the Cowboys in a blowout loss on October 14th, and I'm with JK. Cowboys are a complete mess. You have to chalk certain games up as outliers. To me, that's one of them, and I just feel like coming off the bye, this is a Jacksonville team that in recent years has responded. I mean, this will be the 8th time since 2010 that Jacksonville will be coming off a bye week prior to the middle of November. Jaguars have gone 7-0 against the spread in the previous 7 instances. They're also 6-0 against the spread when playing the Colts since the start of 2015. I think there's a lot of reasons to like the Jaguars here. I think when you also consider road teams with a win percentage between 25 and 40%, when they're coming off 4 losses in the prior 5 games, 13-0 straight up against the money line between plus 130 and minus 150 since the start of 2014 when they're facing an opponent with a losing record. I just feel like there's an awful lot of these betting systems that point in the Jaguars' favor, and the best time to get on a team is when the price is depressed. It's a traditional buy low situation here with Jacksonville, and I think it's too good to pass up.
It's interesting. You got some very notable angles there for sure. Before I let this home road thing go by, you guys have both mentioned the Cowboys and how bad they've looked. But again, it seems like almost a tale of 2 teams. They have indeed looked horrendous on the road and have shown a little bit of quality at home. JK, before you mentioned the idea of you don't buy the idea that a team is particularly good on the road, but what about as opposed to just being a quality team? What about the converse of that? Is it possible that a team like the Cowboys is just fadeable on the road, but you have to look at them differently when they're at home, or do you feel like they've gotten it done at home through smoke and mirrors?
Smoke and mirrors. I think they're an inconsistent football team that has some explosive players. They have not a terrible home field advantage. I mean, I don't think the Cowboy Stadium is like the most raucous place in the world. However, it is a dome. There's a lot of different light angles that can throw you off in dome games when it comes to catching the football and things like that. I just think that they've probably overperformed at home a few times that have given people the idea that they're an okay football team. But obviously the Jacksonville game was one of those. I just don't think they're very good. The sneaky thing about the Cowboys that makes them tough to bet against is their style of just like running the football. That can keep you in football games. That can sneak you covers when you shouldn't, when you're definitely on the right side. And so they're dangerous to bet against in that regard because they're not a team that's just going to like really get opened up on. They're going to always just kind of be around because of the nature of the way that they play with running the football as well as they do at times.
Another reason why you'd be more attracted to teasing Philly down, having to win as opposed to laying the 7 there.
Absolutely. And it's Dallas, Philly, right? So we already know there's gonna be batteries flying and all that stuff. So, and I don't have it in front of me. My computer died. Is that a night game?
That is the night game. That's the Sunday night game, 8:20.
Right. So those games, in my opinion, with no stat, they just always seem to lean to the home team. You'll get those weird home teams playing at home and prime time, and next thing you know, they're they're up 14 when they're supposed to be down 14.
It is an aggressive line in that sense. I feel like if you just woke me up in the middle of the night and said 2 NFC East teams playing on national TV, what's the line? I would have yawned and said home team -3. So in that sense, maybe the 7 is a lot. Do you have a view on that one, Scott?
Yeah, this is a tough spot for the Cowboys. Cowboys are coming off the short week, having played on Monday night, and the Eagles are coming off a bye. And I don't just kind of, indiscriminately favor teams coming off a bye, but I think the combination of extra rest versus short rest, and when you look at the Eagles and what they've done traditionally, they're 16-3 straight up, 12-6-1 against the spread when they have more than a week off since 2000. That record actually includes a 37-9 blowout in Dallas last November, for whatever that's worth. I feel like this is the line is probably just about right. If I had to play it, I would lay up to 7 points in this game. I feel like just that combination of, things looking up for the Eagles and things seeming to be unraveling at the moment for the Cowboys. I mean, a 2-touchdown loss at home to a Titans team, and both the Cowboys and Titans were coming off a bye. But to be coming off a bye week and to lose by 2 touchdowns at home to really what should be a below average, slightly below average, but still a below average NFL team, I think really kind of speaks volumes about the difficulties that team is having, especially on the offensive side of the ball. To have just so little coming out of that bye week, that's a red flag for me.
Makes sense. While we're talking NFC East, I thus far on this podcast have more or less avoided talking about my beloved New York Giants, mostly because I didn't think anybody out there in podcast land needed to hear a grown man cry. But that said, looking at this, even at 1-7, given the difficulty of the strength of schedule, given the games that they've had to play in, I think I'm going to go ahead and say I feel like they've been a little unlucky, and I understand it's not a team you would ever make a favorite on the road, but I thought maybe San Francisco getting the full 3 against them, it almost made me think that maybe I want to get involved in this game on the Giants side before remembering that part of the problem is, tough schedule or not, it does seem like there are some team in turmoil characteristics going on here. This game, the Monday night game, Giants traveling to San Francisco, is this one that you're going to be playing at all, JK, or are you going to stay out of trouble here?
I actually kind of like the game a lot. I've said over and over, probably not on this podcast, and you might want to close your ears for this, but I don't think Eli is very good. I think one of the things that he does that drives me the most insane from an offensive standpoint and efficiency is he's constantly throwing off of his back foot, falling away from the throw, and that's like quarterback 101 of like the way in which to fail playing that position. Drives me nuts. However, I think they're one of the most dangerous 1-7 teams in the NFL. Or just, I guess I'll just say bad teams in the NFL. They have an experienced quarterback who's won 2 Super Bowls. They have the top 3 most explosive wide receivers in the game at Odell Beckham Jr. And they have probably the most explosive, if not the second or third most explosive running back in the game. That combination, when you're getting points and you're coming off of a bye, those are things that I think that you can really look to improve. I think they're going to play well. The 49ers are beat up. We all know about that. 2 of their big price tag players are on the IR. So I think that there's definitely an opportunity for them to come into town and to beat up on the 49ers a little bit. I actually kind of like the Giants in this game.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. And as for your comments about Eli, I'm sure after they are relayed to him, he is going to go to bed tonight, clutching his Super Bowl rings and MVP trophies and crying himself to sleep. Scott, any view? Now, you might be prejudiced against the Giants for other reasons. Might we be onto something here with this pick, or is this in the stay away category, or better yet, can you take us on heads up in this one?
Yeah, I would take the other side of this one. I mean, you look at what the Giants have done in recent seasons. They're just 1-9 against the spread in games where the line is between +3 and -3. It feels like I still think they get too much respect from odds makers. I was surprised that going into their bye that the Redskins weren't laying 3 on the road against the Giants, a game that the Redskins won by 7. I hear what JK is saying about all the talent, but it has just not worked out. I mean, they've only surpassed 30 points once since Tom Coughlin was the team's head coach. And that was actually a game they lost to Carolina 33-31. This is just a team that consistently struggles to put up points. And I'm not quite sure. I just don't see them suddenly turning it on, especially with the way the team started offloading some of its higher-priced guys during the bye week and leading up to the bye week. I think coming out of the bye week, that could end up being addition by subtraction, but until I start seeing evidence of the Giants staying in games they should stay in. And I hear you with the tough schedule, but I think when, in their last 10 games, going 1-9 against the spread when the line is between +3 and -3, and actually the one cover in that 1-9 was when, I'm trying to remember, the Buccaneers beat them 25-23, and the Giants were getting 2.5 points. So it wasn't even like an emphatic win. It was a game that they covered the spread by 0.5 point. Now, I get it, a cover's a cover, but for those 10 games with lines between +3 and -3, for them to lose 9, and the only one they win is a game they lose by 2 as a 2.5 point underdog, I would be staying away from the Giants in these games with the close lines, the games that are essentially pick 'em, because they've consistently underperformed in those games.
It's certainly interesting to think about, and that's a good example of the kind of stat you'll find in DRF Sports Form, of which Scott is the managing editor. And you can read Scott's work and check out everything in the Sports Form. You can find easy links to that at drf.com, also foxsheets.com, where you can also pick up the Platinum Sheet and also the Best Bets column or supplement, I guess I should say, from foxsheets.com, where Scott and the other handicappers will have their best ideas for the week. We will give a little bit of a preview of that in our next segment. We'll each give out one game, these guys will give out one game where they have the utmost confidence. And then for more, you can check out foxsheets.com and the DRF Sports Form itself. JK, we'll start with you. One game above all that you're interested in this weekend, ideally either a money line or point spread game, as opposed to one you'll just throw in a teaser. But if it has to be via teaser, we'll accept it.
I think it would be the Eagles at home on Sunday night going against the reeling Cowboys. Like Scott mentioned, they had 2 weeks to prepare for that game, and to show up and play like they did. They started off okay, and then they just kind of gave it away to a team that I don't think anyone thinks is going to make a run at any championships this year. So, I think the Eagles at home, based on that, playing against a team who's not very good and under their lights, I would take the Eagles, the -6.5.
Okay, interesting. I was sure you were going to say money line based on that earlier observation you made about the Cowboys, but when with feet pressed to the fire, you take it with the points. Scott, how about you? Of your best bets, what's one you're willing to release here? And then we'll have folks go ahead and buy the product on foxsheets.com to get the rest of it.
All right. Well, I don't want to cheat here, but I kind of gave it away before with Detroit and Jacksonville. So I will also throw this out here. I think the over in the Bills-Jets game. Now, I know that sounds it looks like a game on paper that's going to end up being maybe 8-4 final with 4 safeties against 2 safeties. But this line at 37 as an over-under to me is just way too low. I mean, you look at a game in this day and age with the way the rules are, this game could be 21-17 and the over cashes the ticket. If you want a betting system to go with that, any game when the total is between 35.5 and 42, with one of the teams coming off a close loss by 7 points or fewer to a division rival, that being the Jets, the over is 27-3 in November games since the start of 2009. So that's a pretty significant sample size. And I think that combined with the fact, and again, you look at this game beforehand and you kind of throw your hands up and say, gosh, how is either of these teams going to score points? Well, the defenses of each of these teams aren't really setting the world on fire. I mean, they're not horrific defenses, but they're not top 10 defenses. And to me, again, in this day and age, a total of 37 and giving that betting system that has a 90% success rate that you can apply to it, I'm going over 37 in Bills Jets.
I like it. Couple of good ideas there. Good ideas from JK as well throughout the show. And that'll do it for this edition of the DRF Sports Form podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale. I want to thank Scott and JK for their time today, producer JK as well. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. Hopefully we'll all be playing this weekend, and most important of all the bounces will go our way.